It is possible, of course, to create interesting drumming parts purely in the digital domain without any reference or consideration of what goes on in the real world of drumming and percussion playing. In fact, unless we are trying to emulate a real-world drumming scenario, there is no need to do so. Indeed, working with virtual drum machines allows the user to create patterns which might be very difficult or perhaps impossible for human drummers. But nevertheless, some considerations of what goes on when musicians play real drums and percussion in a band or ensemble situation can help inform our approach to working with digital patterns. This video tutorial considers some of these features with reference to a track from my album Days of Sun and Days of Rain. The track in question is called Giving Way to Fruitful Years and can be accessed by using the links below the video. Initially, I had thought of working with a single drum part using Latin percussion, but soon found out I wasn't getting the sound I was looking for. Latin percussion players usually play in groups, often playing simple patterns which combine to make something more complex and sophisticated. There is dialogue between players, they will copy each other's patterns or set up musical conversations which help create interesting variation. Some players will be more experienced than others, so you will get complex and simple rhythms working together. Some players keep time very strictly, others are freer with the beat. Some will have a consistent playing action so that the tone or timbre of their beats is always the same. Others, by accident or design, will vary the sound more by hitting the instrument harder or softer, or varying exactly where they strike the notes on the instrument. And of course, a percussion group will always sound more spread out than a single player. All of these considerations can be emulated quite simply in Ableton to help create interesting parts from basically simple looped patterns. So the first thing I did was to create 3 drum tracks. All use the same standard Ableton kit called Conga B, but the parts are panned left, centre and right, and compression levels are set slightly differently. Let's begin by looking at bars 1 to 16. I've talked earlier about different playing styles. A really useful Ableton effect for percussion parts is called Add Some Random, and this can be found in the MIDI effects section. It's very easy to use, and the help function explains how it works really clearly. Varying velocities for the second player's track gives the impression of perhaps playing with less control and precision than the other drummers. Or is it that they are more expressive and the others more robotic? Either way, it adds a degree of interest and helps bring the percussion section to life. Let's listen to track 2 on its own from this point. Do you notice how the velocities are varying very slightly throughout the course of that loop? Now let's bring in the other percussion parts with this one. Let's now switch to arrangement view. There is a more radical way in which tracks 1 and 2 differ. Player 2 is playing the same pattern as player 1, but at twice the speed. We call this diminution, and it's easy to do in Ableton using the play at double tempo function. Let's listen to tracks 1 and 2 individually and then put them together. So here's track 1. steady tempo. Now here's track 2 going at twice the speed. And here they are together. I talked earlier about combining simpler parts with more complex ones, perhaps emulating the different levels of ability in a drumming group. In my song, the third part is harder. It goes across the rhythm of parts 1 and 2 by dropping some beats. In so doing, it sets up a cross rhythm where the repeated loops move at different rates. Track 3 plays the same loop as track 1, but instead of being 4 bars long, it has been cut down slightly to 3 bars and 1 beat. In so doing, it sets up a cross rhythm where the repeated loops move at different rates. So here are the 3 tracks together. Let's bring in some of the other parts. Bars 17 to 32 are based on the same pattern, but we swap one of the instruments. We go from tumba to quinto, while keeping the original conga part. This gives a sense of continuity, but with some variety. Again, this is easy to do in Ableton. We simply transpose one MIDI instrument higher or lower. You can do this by trial and error until you find a new combination that sounds good. So I just select one of the instruments, I can move it lower or higher until I get to the one I want. Let's listen to the changeover from tumba to quinto. Over the next few sections, notice how the patterns change at different times on the tracks, so that changes are smoother and some interesting counter rhythms emerge as the tracks change over. Let's listen to the first changeover, marked by the first red arrow. In the section beginning bar 53, we set up another interesting cross rhythm by offsetting the starting point for track 1. The pattern comes in on the third beat of bar 1, creating a new composite rhythm pattern across the 3 tracks. I'll mute the other parts so we can concentrate on listening to the percussion in this section. Again, this is a technique that more experienced Latin players might use in their drumming groups. So here it is from just before bar 53. So the main ideas we have covered in this tutorial are these. Spread the percussion over several tracks to give yourself more control of the overall sound. Work with simple rhythm patterns, but look at ways of meshing them together to give an interesting combined output. Use Ableton's Add Some Random effect. Humanizing drums is often more about adding variety to velocities rather than always relying on different quantizing procedures. Have some players playing shorter patterns by chopping one or more beats off the loop pattern. augmentation and diminution are really important procedures, having some players play the basic pattern at double or half the speed. Half parts change at different times for a smoother changeover. Offsetting the starting point for a pattern, again a really easy procedure in Ableton, can give some very interesting results. Above all, let your ears be the judge. Play with different combinations of instruments and patterns, using a trial and error approach to try ideas out. Your ears will let you know which ones are working and which ones to reject. For more ideas on working with MIDI drum patterns, look at my first video in this series, how to devise really interesting drum patterns with Ableton Live. And look out for the next video, how to create dynamic arrangements with Ableton Live, which explores the melodic and harmonic dimensions of this song. I hope you've enjoyed this video and find it useful. You can hear the full track by following the links given below the video. And of course, constructive comments are always most welcome.